Imagine opening Instagram and realizing you're watching a real crime unfold in real time. Not a rumor, not a headline, but screenshots spreading before police even arrived. In July 2019, that's exactly what happened. A 17-year-old girl from Utica, New York, and a crime that went viral before authorities could speak. Her name was Bianca Devins. Some crimes happen in silence. Others happen in public. But a few unfold in a way no one is prepared for, not because of how they happened, but because of how the world discovered them. In July of 2019, thousands of people opened their phones and saw something they were never meant to see. Not a news report, not a warning, not a headline, but images connected to a real teenager who had just lost her life. Her name was Bianca Devins. She was 17 years old. Bianca was known by her friends and family for her incredible creativity and her unique way of expressing herself. She often dyed her hair vibrant colors, like bright pink, changing it frequently. It was a small detail, but it reflected how she saw herself and how she wanted to be seen. To the people who knew and loved her, it was a beautiful part of her identity. But to the cold, anonymous corners of the internet, it became just another image, detached from the person it belonged to. What made this case so different, so profoundly disturbing, wasn't only the crime itself, but the horrifying speed at which it spread. It was the way strangers on the internet learned about it before law enforcement had even finished responding to the scene. It left behind an unsettling, modern question that we are still grappling with today. When a real human tragedy becomes online content, who is truly responsible? Bianca lived in Utica, New York. She was an artist, creative, expressive, and like so many teenagers, she shared parts of her life online, connecting with friends and communities that understood her. On July 13th, 2019, she went to a concert in New York City. She was with a small group of people, including a man named Brandon Andrew Clark, who was 21 years old at the time. To anyone looking from the outside, it probably seemed like a completely ordinary night out, friends, enjoying music, living their lives. The early hours of the next morning, something had gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. And before the authorities could even piece together what happened and make an official announcement, the internet already knew. The posts had already begun. What followed would become one of the most chilling and disturbing examples of how violence, obsession, and the architecture of online platforms can collide, leaving behind permanent, devastating damage that extends far beyond the physical crime scene. Bianca Devins and Brandon Clark knew each other through online spaces and some shared social circles. Their connection, as investigators would later describe it, was complicated. It was marked by a clear emotional imbalance and a growing tension that simmered just beneath the surface. After the concert ended, the group started heading back toward the Utica area. It was during the early morning hours of July 14th, 2019, that police believe a serious argument erupted between Bianca and Clark. The exact words that were exchanged in those final, critical moments are known only to one person. But what followed is tragically and publicly documented. Bianca Devins lost her life that night. In the immediate aftermath, instead of calling for help or turning himself in, Brandon Clark made a series of calculated decisions that would forever define how this case is remembered. He began posting. He uploaded gruesome images and cryptic messages to online platforms like Discord and other social media spaces, directly referencing what he had done. The people who saw these posts were first confused. Then, as the reality sank in, they became alarmed. And then, horrified. Some users, unable to process what they were seeing, thought it was a sick prank, an elaborate and cruel hoax. But others understood the gravity of the situation and immediately contacted authorities, frantically trying to explain what they had just witnessed on their screens. Using the digital trail Clark had left, police were able to trace his activity to a quiet, dead-end road in Utica. When officers arrived at the location, their worst fears were confirmed. They found Bianca Devins unresponsive. Nearby, they found Brandon Clark, who was suffering from serious, self-inflicted injuries. He was immediately taken into custody and transported to a hospital for treatment. From there, the investigation moved with incredible speed. There was no mystery about who was involved. Clark himself had made sure of that. What stunned investigators and the public alike was not just the tragic loss of a young life, but the central, horrifying role the internet played. In the hours that followed, the images had already spread like wildfire. Copies were saved, shared, and re-uploaded, existing far beyond anyone's control. The digital evidence was out there, unstoppable. And in the most heartbreaking turn of all, Bianca's family began to learn the horrific details of her final moments, not from the compassionate, careful report of a police officer, but from complete strangers online who were sending them the very images Clark had posted. The emotional damage was instant, profound, and absolutely irreversible. How does a family even begin to recover from that? Brandon Clark was later charged with second-degree murder. As his case slowly progressed through the legal system, the focus of the public conversation began to expand far beyond the courtroom walls. This was no longer just about one man and his horrific actions. It became a national conversation about accountability, about the responsibilities of social media platforms, and about how easily something so deeply personal, so tragic and private, could be twisted into a public spectacle for clicks and shock value. There was a growing fear that Bianca, the vibrant, artistic teenager, was at risk of being overshadowed by the monstrous way her death was discovered and consumed by the world. In February of 2020, Brandon Andrew Clark pleaded guilty to the charge of second-degree murder. His plea was an admission of what was already undeniable. Then, in March of 2021, he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. The court had delivered its judgment. The legal system had run its course. But for Bianca's family, closure was not, and could never be, that simple. They were left to live with the agonizing knowledge that their daughter's most vulnerable moment had been stolen, circulated, memed, discussed, and consumed by millions of people who never knew her, who never cared about her, and who saw her only as a piece of shocking content. In the years that followed, Bianca's name became inextricably tied not only to a brutal crime but to a much broader, urgent conversation about responsibility in our digital age. Her family, showing immense strength in the face of unimaginable pain, channeled their grief into action. Their advocacy led to a significant change. In 2022, New York passed a new piece of legislation that became known as Bianca's Law. This law significantly strengthened the penalties for the unauthorized creation and distribution of graphic images of crime victims. It was a crucial step, designed to prevent other families from ever having to experience the same secondary trauma, the same digital violation that Bianca's family endured. But laws don't erase trauma, and they certainly don't undo what has already spread across the vast, permanent memory of the internet. What remains is a deeply cautionary story. It's not just a story about violence, but about obsession, about entitlement, and about how quickly our human empathy can evaporate when we are hidden behind a screen. It's about the dehumanizing nature of viral content. Bianca Devins was not a headline. She was not a trending topic. She was a person, a daughter, a friend, a sister, a teenager with dreams and plans, and a future that never got the chance to unfold. Her case forces us to have an uncomfortable but necessary reflection, not only on how crimes happen, but on how we, as a society and as individuals, respond to them. Because when tragedy becomes viral, the harm doesn't end at the crime scene. It multiplies, it spreads, and it lasts forever. The facts of this case are known. The legal process is complete, but the questions it raised are still hanging in the air. How do we protect human dignity in a world that rewards shock and outrage? How do we teach ourselves to pause, to think, to slow down before we click, share, or engage with something so irreversible? And how do we remember the countless lives that are forever affected long after the cameras turn away and the world moves on to the next story? If you follow real true crime cases, told carefully, factually, and without exploitation, leave a like, subscribe to Ghost Synergy 13, and join the Synergy. We post true crime and dark cases every day, not for shock, but to document what really happened and why it still matters.